Hello, I'm Alison Hargreaves from guidesforbrides.co.uk, and I am absolutely thrilled today to have LaToya Patel joining us. LaToya is from Southwest Events, SW Events. She is a luxury wedding planner. So welcome, LaToya.
Hi, Alison. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here having this conversation.
So perhaps you can let couples know a little bit more about what you do and your involvement in weddings.
Yeah, so the company is SW Events, and we've also started something called the Asian Wedding Club. Family-oriented, family-run business. So it's myself and my husband that run it, and we've been going for nearly 8 years now. Predominantly, our specialism is around an Asian wedding. But in terms of what we've been up to within the wedding industry, so since lockdown, we have been doing a whole bunch of things. We've been very conscious of the impact that this has been having on so many people and so many businesses, to be fair. We have offered free consultations to couples that aren't even planning with us. We have started, the Asian Wedding Club kind of was born during lockdown, but it was an idea previous to lockdown. And then we found ourselves getting involved in more wider conversations about the wedding industry and the Love My Dress campaigns that you may have seen that are out. We've been part of many of those conversations. And most recently, I was actually invited to attend a meeting with one of the MPs. So we're trying as best we can to just donate as much of our time as we can to try and see if we can get a great solution for everybody.
Fantastic. It's really good that there's companies like SW Events really getting behind this. And can you just talk us through why Black and Asian couples are specifically feeling excluded under the current guidance?
Yes, so I think the first lot of guidance was released on the 4th of July, and at that point it was very clear that it's very specific to a legal wedding ceremony. And then since then we've had the next round of guidance, which came out, I believe, on the 17th of July, and this added in the receptions, but it still has a statement in there to say, and I'm going to read this. It actually says, religious ceremonies, those not taking place under the law of England and Wales, belief ceremonies, blessings, or other non-statutory ceremonies are not covered. Which means that if you are having an Asian wedding ceremony, such as a such as a nikah, which is the Muslim wedding ceremony, or a Hindu wedding ceremony, if you're having an traditional African wedding ceremony, even if you're having a Jewish wedding ceremony, none of these are covered. They are not part of the ceremony guidance. All you can still do today is have a legal wedding ceremony. But actually for these couples, so particularly it's actually for any couple that's planning a cultural wedding. Essentially, these guidelines say that you cannot have your cultural wedding. And as a result of that, it does have people feeling very sidelined, because the cultural weddings are the ones that mean the most to them. And you're not really married, and you're not really deemed to be married within those cultures until you've done your cultural wedding. So doing the legal ceremony doesn't give you essentially the green light to go ahead and potentially move in together or start family planning and moving on with your life. It's the cultural ceremony that this all hangs off of, and that's what the families look forward to, and it's very embedded. That actually it is that ceremony that gets you that gets you through and allows you to kind of say, great, I'm married. But right now they're not allowed to do them legally according to these guidance.
And this is leaving out a huge number of couples. Absolutely. And also it's some of the weddings that really contribute to the 10.5 billion economy as well. So really matters that this is.
It does, and it's a massive oversight. It's really disappointing to see, given that we, as British people, we like to claim that we live in this very, diverse, multicultural country, and yet this enormous oversight. Still, they've had many weeks to correct it. It has been raised. I know that it has been raised. I have even asked the question directly, but we still don't know when this is going to be removed.
Yeah, and it doesn't help the utter confusion about size of weddings, because obviously a lot of these weddings are very, very big events. You know, the 30 is, you know, is a little bit of a joke. You know, it's just not going to be possible. And I know they happen in a multitude of different types of venues, but is the indication that some of these really big venues, the conference venues, the stadiums opening on the 1st of October, is that giving any indication at all to Black and Asian communities that that might be the point that these bigger weddings could possibly start taking place?
So I've seen a lot of speculation on this point. I'm not really one to get into the speculation. What I can say is that I have not to date seen anything officially released that puts a conference and a stadium event and a wedding in the same category. It appears to me that these two things are very separately discussed. So I can't see that there is a direct linkage from the powers that be, that one thing opening means that the other thing is definitely going to be on the cards. I feel like the way that they are being discussed means that there is a view that a conference or a stadium event and the way that people behave at those is being viewed very differently to the interactions and the behaviors that you will see at a wedding where you have people that you know and love. So I'm personally, I'm not wholly persuaded that the two things are interlinked in the way that I know a lot of people are hanging on to the hope for. Time will tell, but I'm not one of the people that is advocating that one thing leads to the other, because I just have not seen the evidence of it.
Yeah, and you know, as we've seen with restaurants and pubs opening and weddings still not happening, yeah, as you say, it's
not to say that it's completely fair, and we have to be really conscious that ultimately we're all after safety. Like we don't wish to have large events that inevitably, you know, become super spreaders, if is the terminology that's floating around at the moment. But you know, I get that for very, very many people, and it's not just the Asian and Black communities. We were in a discussion recently, I think it was just yesterday, the day's emerging for me, with somebody who was planning a church wedding, followed by a wedding breakfast. And for them, the statement that I remember quite clearly from that conversation was that they're willing to compromise, but 30 is a compromise too far. So this isn't just for the larger weddings that 30 is a compromise too far. I think it's for most weddings that it's a compromise too far. But ultimately, for the larger weddings, it is a completely different wedding. If you even tried to make it into 30 people, you would have to replan the entire thing. Yeah. And you're in a venue that accommodates your larger number, which is what you wanted to do in the first place. And how you get that to 30 people, and do you want 30 people rattling around in such a large space? It's a whole discussion unto itself, but I think 30 is just a tough number for such a lot of people at the moment. But it's really difficult when you have large families, and I think that is part of the issue with the Black and Asian communities in particular, is that the family units tend to be a little bit larger.
Yeah.
And so 30 people could just be like your husband's or your fiance's side, with, you know, just him, his parents, and his, you know, brothers and sisters and their spouses. That could get you to 30 really quite quickly. And therefore, what do you do at that point? You know, you're not going to say, I'm sorry, brother 1, 2, you can't come. So it's really tricky. It's really tricky.
Yeah, and of course it excludes all of those amazing suppliers as well. They're all part of the wedding, and yes. It's excluding them.
Yes, because I think at the moment the guidance does suggest there are a couple of named suppliers within there, like a photographer and a videographer, that would count into your numbers. So that makes it difficult, because then all of a sudden it's not 30 guests, it's potentially, you know, fewer guests, because you want this moment, this, you know, life affirming moment to be photographed.
Yeah, and I understand with particularly Asian weddings, where it tends to be external caterers. Yeah, the current guidance is that venue staff don't count within that. So if you are in a fully catered venue, that's absolutely fine. They can be there. It's very, very different with this, although we did notice that the wording that was updated on Friday was saying it's a sit-down meal for 30 people. So our assumption now is that although the ceremony is 30 people, with the exception of venue staff, the actual sit-down meal, certainly at the moment, the wording suggests that that can be 30 people, including bride and groom, but that's basically guests. But it really doesn't make much of a difference.
No, and I think that the tricky thing with this current set of guidelines is that you read one paragraph, it says one thing. As you go a little bit further down, it says something that leaves you feeling confused as to what is actually meant, because it seems somewhat contradictory, and then you're left trying to figure it out. So I think for suppliers generally, it's really hard at the moment to give decent advice, because actually you possibly could interpret these guidelines in two different ways, and the suppliers are really having to work out what they can and can't do. So yes, I would say if there are any brides and grooms watching this, like, just bear with your suppliers, because we're all muddling through this and trying to figure out what these guidelines really mean to each of our respective types of business. But with the external catering was the point that you'd mentioned. A lot of the cultural weddings will have external catering associated with them, and as a result of that, if caterers are included in the sit-down meal, and I can only, because the guidance specifically mentions a caterer, you're not having a caterer at the ceremony because you're not allowed to have food and drink, I can only deduce that they mean the catering for the evening, or for the dinner. At that point, you're again limiting your numbers, so it becomes really difficult to figure out how you might be able to do something like this.
It seems at the moment it's incredibly restrictive. So at the moment, assuming that this guidance for 30 remains for the time being, what would your advice be for couples that have got a date booked in and they're hanging on to that hope for, say, August or September? Do you think that's going to happen for numbers larger than 30 and in these big enough venues and these multi-day events?
Yeah, so August is around the corner. We're the 23rd of July today. I feel like August is not going to happen. I can't see a dramatic shift. I could be proven wrong. Like, these are just my opinions. I could be proven wrong, but I can't see a dramatic shift between now and August. And actually, these current guidance only kick in on the 1st of August anyway. So if they were to change them, it would have to be within the next couple of weeks, or the next week even, to make any amendment for the 1st of August, because the receptions come onto the table for the 1st of August. By reception, we obviously mean a sit-down dinner. So I'm not sure. If you've got an August wedding, I can't really see that more than 30 people is going to happen for that. I think it's just too close. With a September wedding, my personal feeling is I feel like there's not going to be huge change for September, but I caution to say that I could be proven wrong. I wasn't necessarily expecting to see a sit-down dinner coming onto the table for August, so it's difficult to gauge where this is going to go next, and what the government is prepared to allow and not. But what I will say is I think that there is increasing pressure from what we're seeing in the media, what we're seeing on social media, the news, etc., that people are really starting to question how this works, given what they're seeing in their everyday lives as they walk down a high street and, you know, they look into a restaurant or a bar. So whether or not that makes a difference as to where this goes, I'm not sure. But I do know that more and more people are starting to question the logic behind how it's 30 for a wedding. And to be honest, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, and later on in the year, once these big venues are starting to open and we start to see bigger conferences and events, which we know isn't going to be before the 1st of October,
yeah.
For those couples with weddings booked after the 1st of October, should they be holding on to a little bit more hope, or is it still, in your opinion, just not going to be feasible? We've already talked about the fact weddings are being treated as far more dangerous than other interactions. Should they be hanging on at all at the moment?
I think so. So my view on this is it's very couple dependent. My general advice is this: if you're feeling anxiety, or it's starting to be, it's beginning to, or really taking a toll on your mental health, then you really do need to consider that, and you need to make a decision based on that information. If your venue is allowing you to make an adjustment, and that is something that you actually genuinely want to pursue, then go ahead and do that. If, however, you feel strongly that you want to hang on, then hang on, but maybe reach out to your suppliers to find out where they stand with certain things, so that at least you're informed should you decide to make a decision later on down the line, or closer to your wedding date, that you would indeed like to move it. I do know that there are definitely still people hanging on for even September and onward weddings. I know that for a fact. And that's not just a smaller wedding, that is also within the Black and African weddings, that there are people definitely still hanging on for those. But I think we don't know. We really don't know what the future holds. So it's entirely up to you as to what you think could work. We have seen more couples. So we've got a couple that we're planning a wedding for who has decided that they're going to do their legal ceremony this year. They've already postponed the rest of the wedding to next year. And so then they're actually quite happy about the concept of being able to do an element of their wedding this year. And so they're doing their legal ceremony this year with the 30 people guidance. And it's going to be in central London, and they're really excited about it. So it really varies from couple to couple. There are options. It could be there's a smaller event that you want to pull out, so that you just, you're able to have some element of a celebration, even though that isn't the thing that makes you feel legally, not legally, but makes you feel properly wed. But it gives you something, so it's very, I would say it's up to the couples. You've got to go by what feels right to you.
And we know from the few couples that were happy with a small wedding and hung on to their July dates, they were absolutely over the moon. I mean, we're only hearing positive stories about people saying actually it was the most magical thing, and because it was, they're amongst the first weddings to take place, it makes them all the more special. So for those that are really comfortable leaving it to the edge, then great. And that's superb for our economy, for the wedding economy, to know that when we're allowed to open, there's going to be couples there ready to get married. That is, great news for us. But I guess it very often comes down to the policies of the venues. Have you found couples are being supported? Are they being allowed to postpone or put a backup date in place so they can leave it to the last minute?
Yes, it depends. It really depends. So for our direct couples, we've had success with all of them for postponing. So all of ours, this was maybe by, I would say, the end of April, beginning of May, all of our couples for the whole year decided that they wanted to shift their weddings. And we had weddings booked in until the end of October. It's not for everybody. They all had different circumstances. Many of our couples had people flying in. Some of them had their parents living overseas. A couple of our couples themselves live overseas. So it was, the circumstances we do have to take into consideration. But ultimately, it is something that it's just such a personal choice, Alison, to be honest with you. And I just feel as though if it's going to work for you to do the 30, carry on and do it safely. So please make sure that if you are going to go ahead with a wedding, in whatever size and scale it's going to be, according to the guidelines that are in place at that time, please do it safely. Please don't be those people that, as soon as you walk through the door, everything goes out the window, because it will ruin it for other people. And ultimately, we are still facing, we've not been cleared of whatever this pandemic is. So we just need to be mindful of the fact that we want to continue to keep ourselves safe, and your suppliers want to continue to keep themselves safe. And it's not just your weddings that they're supplying. So I'm not sure if I went off on a complete tangent just then, but just
I think it's important. It's actually a very important, very relevant point, though, because the government will be looking at these early weddings and seeing if they are a cause of outbreaks. And I know there is a huge concern that there are mutterings that couples are going underground with their weddings and these are happening in secret. And as a result, inevitably, they're not going to be happening with the same level of COVID security. It's just not possible. And not least because it's difficult to, report and use test and trace if you've been doing these, illegal weddings. And it's putting the suppliers in a really difficult position. That's
extremely difficult.
Insurance. But most of all, if they then do cause outbreaks, then it's going to put the entire industry back such a long way. So I think that's quite a big worry. But from your point of view, I mean, amazing, you've moved all of your weddings to next year. And I know a lot of venues and suppliers have been really good at just moving them. But that means no income at all for your company. How does SW Events manage no income? Is this a really, really big problem in your sector, more so than others, where, there's at least a few crumbs falling from the table and a little bit going on?
Yeah, so, I mean, we've managed to get ourselves to a position where we feel we're financially okay for a period of time. So right at the beginning, it was on our minds. We had to look at our finances quite seriously because this is our main form of income, is our only form of income. So we needed to work out exactly how far we could go with what we have, and we've done that. And we know that we've got some more runway. We have taken a booking during lockdown, which is helpful. And we have noticed that there was a massive difference actually between couples whose weddings were planned for 2020 and couples who are booking their weddings now for the future. Very different mindsets between those two groups of couples. So the couple that booked us during lockdown, they're planning a wedding for 2021 and they are just so excited about their wedding, which is, it's really lovely to work with because you kind of get a little bit, you can get excited with them. But at the same time, most of our couples were 2020 couples, and the extent to which they have any excitement over the situation is very questionable, because it's really hard. It's really hard to come to terms with the fact that your dream has moved, that your life is on hold for a little bit longer, and all the things that you had planned have disappeared. And for some couples, it was, they were that close. So it's rough. For businesses though, like within our network, we have, with the suppliers that we use anyway, there's a variety of different feeling. There's a supplier we spoke to recently who was explaining that they've lost over $1 million during this period of time. And they're a super successful company. There's another supplier that I've spoken to who's explained to me that they can get themselves to the end of this year. And at that point, they really need to figure out what they're going to do next. There are suppliers that are having to furlough people in the hope that they can extend their runway. I've heard one really heartbreaking story from a supplier who had to sell their photography equipment. It's, but then there are other suppliers that are trying to pivot their businesses so that they can still maintain a level of income. It's just, it varies. It's really different across the suppliers, but it is hard. But what I have been really heartened to see is so many suppliers trying to do the very best for their clients. So we really do miss our couples. And, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the demand. You can't foist a wedding on somebody. Like, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the demand. So ultimately, underneath it all, I think suppliers they just miss their couples, and they would love to be working, but they just want to be able to do it in a safe manner.
Sorry, we know different parts of the UK, there's slightly different regulations as well, that's then making it even worse for these suppliers. That, if you're in Northern Ireland now, it's slightly different regulations, and
Wales is different.
Wales seems to just be a step more restrictive all of the way through. And at the moment, we're talking a lot about what's happening in England, just because we're waiting for that guidance. That's why the topic this week, because at the moment it feels like we might just be able to make a difference to that guidance, and we want to make that difference before it comes out. And so is there any hope from your point of view that things are going to change? I know You know, you have been very involved in conversations, and these conversations are happening. Do you think we're going to see in these guidance any suggestion that Black and Asian couples have been remembered and are being thought about and are being talked about?
So I feel as though if that guidance on ceremonies doesn't change and soon, there will be an uproar, because it is unfair. And a ceremony is a ceremony. We sit and watch it. What is the difference between sitting and watching a legal ceremony and sitting and watching a Hindu ceremony, for example? The fact is that there are a huge swathe of couples that just do not even have the choice. Whether or not they decide to go for the 30 is beside the point, but they don't even have the choice to safely do that right now. And I think that if like that has to change, and I'm personally on a mission with that particular one, because I think if nothing else changes between now and the end of the year, and that is not to say that that is the case, but if that were to be the case, if that needs to change, because that is absolutely it's just awful. I mean, there are stronger words I could use, but it is just awful that we have, as a country, said, well, I'm sorry, but right now it looks like I'm sorry, but you don't really matter. It's all about the legal ceremony. But it just goes to show that there is a level of people who like not even misunderstanding. I was going to say ignorance, but I don't know if that's too strong a word. But there is something going on in this country still, that people are just not aware of what these different things mean to different people. And I get that if you don't have that lived experience, it's very difficult to kind of get you to even know that it's there. But when it's been raised, please do something about it, government. And it has for sure been raised. I know it's been, I feel like it's been at least a good couple of weeks now that the question has been raised with them. And I had the opportunity to raise it again just yesterday. So I hope to see that changing. If nothing else, I hope to see that changing. And then I think the rest of it is going to be very closely linked to how this pandemic sort of peters out and how it progresses. So that's a lot trickier to try and sort of, ascertain where that might go.
Yeah, and I think it's going to affect weddings, not just these multicultural, these Black and Asian weddings.
Yeah.
It's going to be right across the board, because
Absolutely.
Independent celebrants have been really up in arms that one of the things being excluded is celebrants, while there is an issue. We know there's an issue and there's a backlog in some registration districts. I know some registrars are being absolutely brilliant, but some registration districts, couples are struggling to get their notice of marriage that has expired reissued in time. So they've got their wedding plan, they're happy with their, they want a celebrant wedding so that they can just go ahead without the paperwork and sort the legal paperwork later. It affects those weddings as well. It does. Right the way across the board.
It does. I think limiting it to a legal ceremony has such a catastrophic impact across the board. It's not just a Black couple, it's not just an Asian couple. It is, as you say, people who wanted to have a celebrant-led ceremony. It is the Jewish couple who wanted to have a Jewish wedding. It is any couple that was going to experience something as part of their celebration and their marriage that was not just legal. So it's really terrible. I don't understand the logic behind that, because you can still have the same restrictions you want to place around a legal wedding ceremony with any kind of ceremony. So
you can understand the government's reason for making it legal ceremonies, because it started off that it was about the legal, immigration status and so on. But
on the 4th of July, I accepted it.
Yeah.
By the 17th of July, when receptions came onto the table, that's when I was like, this is I can't abide it any longer.
I think you're absolutely, I think everyone is behind you on that. When it was just about the legal ceremony and nothing else, that's fine. But from 1st of August, where these small receptions can take place, and it's showing a lack of understanding about the importance for those in those cultures where it needs that extra bit to be able to move on with your life, have family. And the government have actually said that was part of the reason that people can move on with their lives, have children. And when in the eyes of your community you're not married, it doesn't matter what that legal piece of paper is that
no. I mean, that's just something that you have to do.
Yeah.
And to be fair, you probably don't even have to do it if you didn't want to, but it's just something that you do. So, but actually, the thing that means something, that has all of the blessings that come with your culture, that has all of the tradition that comes with your culture, is the cultural wedding. So actually walking down an aisle and signing a sheet of paper isn't cutting it. Let's be honest, it's got no, you know, tradition within it. It's got no, unless it's obviously a church wedding, at which point, you know, you're getting what you need from that. But if it's just a straight up walk down the aisle, sign a piece of paper situation, you don't get to experience all of the love and blessing and tradition that comes with that. And you know, there are vows that are made within many of those ceremonies as well, promises that are made within those ceremonies that you don't have with a straight up legal wedding.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are going to really be looking forward to seeing this guidance when it comes out. We've been waiting for so many reasons, and this is yet another reason. So thank you so much for raising everyone's awareness on this today. You know, I think it's been an incredibly important conversation to have. It is fantastic that you were in that meeting with the business minister yesterday, Paul Scully. So hopefully at least that message is getting through. So LaToya, thank you so much for all you're doing on behalf of the industry. We really appreciate it, and fingers crossed for that guidance and a little bit more hope for Black and Asian couples. Hopefully things are going to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I'm with you with that. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next. And I think for those people out there who are kind of wanting a little bit of hope, it's not going to remain static. So we just need to keep our eyes peeled for the next chapter.
Superb. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.